A CEO fires a broke janitor, but when he learns it's Elon Musk, his company collapses. It was another busy Monday morning at Stein Tech, one of the most prominent tech companies in the city. Employees shuffled around the towering glass building, rushing to meet deadlines and preparing for their weekly status meetings. No one paid much attention to the janitor quietly sweeping the floors. Clad in a simple uniform and a mask, he moved unnoticed between cubicles, listening, observing. The janitor paused for a moment, taking in the grandiose surroundings. The marble floors gleamed under the soft lighting, and the walls were adorned with accolades and framed magazine covers featuring Richard Stein, the company's CEO. The headlines praised Steintech's innovation and rapid growth, painting Stein as a visionary in the tech world. But to the janitor, something felt off. Richard Stein, the ruthless leader. Richard Stein was known for his cutthroat approach to business. He was a man who valued profit above all else, and he didn't care who he had to step on to get ahead. Employees whispered about his temper, and it was common knowledge that anyone who crossed him wouldn't last long. That morning, Stein stormed into the office, his face set in a scowl. "Where's Mark from accounting?" he barked at his assistant. "He's running late," she said nervously. "His wife just had surgery." "I don't care," Stein snapped. "If he can't be here on time, he doesn't belong here." The assistant swallowed hard and nodded, jotting down a note to schedule Mark's termination meeting. Stein turned on his heel and headed toward the elevator, nearly bumping into the janitor on his way. "Watch where you're going," Stein growled, glaring at the man in the simple uniform. The janitor said nothing, only offering a polite nod before resuming his work. A curious encounter. Later that afternoon, Stein was in his office reviewing financial reports when there was a knock at the door. "Come in," he said without looking up. The janitor entered, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Stein, I was wondering if I could have a moment of your time." Stein frowned. "What is it?" "I'm busy. I've noticed some inefficiencies in the company's operations," the janitor said carefully. "If you'll allow me, I think I can help improve them." Stein raised an eyebrow, incredulous. "You? A janitor? You think you know how to run my company better than I do?" The janitor met his gaze steadily. "I believe I can offer some valuable insights." Stein leaned back in his chair, chuckling. "This is rich. A janitor giving me business advice. I've seen it all now. Listen, pal, why don't you stick to mopping floors and leave the decision-making to the professionals?" The janitor nodded slowly. "Very well. But you might regret not hearing me out." A shocking revelation. As the janitor turned to leave, Stein's assistant burst into the office, her face pale. "Mr. Stein, you're not going to believe this," she said breathlessly, holding up her tablet. "That janitor, he's not who we think he is." Stein frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" The assistant turned the tablet around, showing a news article with a headline that made Stein's blood run cold. "Elon Musk spotted disguised as a janitor, investigating corporate culture for new initiative?" Stein's eyes widened as he turned to the man he had just insulted. "Who? You're Elon Musk?" Elon smiled calmly, removing his mask. Surprise. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation pressing down on Richard Stein like a lead blanket. His jaw tightened, his mind racing to process what had just happened. How could he have missed it? The quiet janitor he had ignored and insulted for weeks was none other than Elon Musk, one of the most influential men in the world. "You," Stein stuttered, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here? Why would someone like you work as a janitor?" Elon's eyes glinted with a mix of curiosity and mischief. "I like to keep things interesting," he said with a slight smirk. "Sometimes, the best way to learn about a company's true culture is to see it from the ground up." Stein swallowed hard, the implications of Elon's words sinking in. He felt a sudden chill despite the warmth of the office. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was an evaluation, a test. And he had just failed miserably. Elon's investigation unfolds. Elon stepped further into the room, his calm demeanor somehow more intimidating than any outburst could have been. "I've been observing your company for a while now," he said. "At first, I was curious about your tech and growth strategies. But it didn't take long for me to notice something troubling. Stein shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Troubling? What do you mean? The way you treat your employees, for one, Elon said, his tone turning serious. It's toxic. Your obsession with profit at any cost has created a culture of fear and resentment. Talented people are leaving, innovation is stifled, and morale is at an all-time low. Stein's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. That's ridiculous. We've been hitting our targets, growing every quarter. At what cost? Elon interrupted, his voice sharp. Numbers can hide a lot, but they don't lie forever. I've spoken to your employees, discreetly of course, and the consensus is clear. They're unhappy, overworked, and underappreciated. The tipping point. Stein leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. You don't understand how hard it is to run a company like this. Sacrifices have to be made. Tough decisions are part of the job. Elon crossed his arms, his expression unyielding. Sacrifices? You mean like firing a loyal employee because his wife had surgery? Or belittling people who try to offer constructive feedback? Stein's mouth opened to respond, but no words came out. The truth hung between them like a ticking bomb, ready to explode. Elon continued, his voice calm but resolute. Leadership isn't about ruling with an iron fist. It's about empowering your people, inspiring them to be the best versions of themselves. If you don't start doing that, Stein Tech will crumble from within. A sudden turn of events. Before Stein could gather his thoughts, the assistant's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen and paled even further. Sir, she said, her voice trembling. There's a problem. What now? Stein barked, his nerves frayed. There's been a mass resignation, she whispered. The entire R&D department just walked out. They sent an email saying they refuse to work in a hostile environment any longer. Stein shot to his feet, his heart pounding. What? They can't do that. They can and they did, Elon said, his voice steady. And they won't be the last if you don't change your ways. The collapse begins. Panic set in as Stein's phone lit up with notifications, emails, missed calls, urgent messages from board members. The company's stock was already taking a hit, news of the mass resignations spreading like wildfire. You have a choice to make, Elon said, his eyes locking onto Stein's. You can continue down this path and watch everything you've built fall apart, or you can take a step back, reflect, and rebuild with integrity. Stein sank back into his chair, his face pale and sweat beading on his forehead. For the first time in years, he felt truly powerless. Elon watched him for a moment, then gave a small nod. I'll leave you to think about it. But remember, no company is too big to fail. With that, Elon turned and walked out of the office, leaving Stein to face the consequences of his actions. A glimmer of hope? Days later, Stein sat in his office, the chaos of the past week still fresh in his mind. The company had taken a massive hit, but there was still a chance, albeit a slim one, to salvage what was left. He picked up the phone and dialed a number, his hand trembling slightly. When the call connected, he took a deep breath. Mr. Musk, he said, his voice filled with uncharacteristic humility. I've been thinking about what you said. If you're willing to help, I'd like to make things right. On the other end of the line, Elon smiled. It's never too late to do the right thing, Richard. Let's get to work. Richard Stein leaned back in his chair, the weight of the past few weeks bearing down on him like a crushing boulder. The phone call with Elon Musk had been a humbling experience. For the first time in years, Stein had admitted that his leadership was flawed. But mere admission wasn't enough, action was required. A meeting was scheduled with Elon the next morning, and Richard knew it would set the tone for the company's future. Employees, still reeling from the mass resignation in the R&D department, awaited some kind of sign, anything to assure them that change was on the horizon. When Elon walked into the boardroom that morning, the atmosphere was electric. Some employees were anxious, others were outright skeptical. Was it really possible for Stein Tech to change, or was this another PR stunt to salvage what little reputation they had left? The town hall meeting. Instead of a private meeting, Elon suggested a company-wide town hall, giving employees a platform to voice their concerns directly. It was a bold move, but one that could help rebuild trust, if handled correctly. The large auditorium was packed with hundreds of employees. Elon stood confidently on stage, microphone in hand, while Richard sat at a table beside him, visibly tense. "I'm not here to sugarcoat things," Elon began. "Steintech is in trouble. But trouble isn't the end, it's an opportunity to rebuild, to evolve." A murmur spread through the crowd. Elon raised a hand to quiet them. "I've spent time with many of you over the past few weeks," he continued. "I've seen your dedication, your passion. But I've also heard your frustrations about the lack of support, the toxic work environment, and the feeling that your voices don't matter. That ends today." The room fell into a tense silence, every eye on Elon. Mr. Stein has acknowledged these issues and wants to make things right. This is your chance to share your thoughts. Well, listen. Employee stories unleashed. One by one, employees stepped up to the microphone. A young woman from the marketing department spoke first. "I've been with this company for 5 years, and I've loved the work. But over the past year, I felt like just a cog in a machine. We're pushed to meet impossible deadlines with no recognition or support." A man from IT followed, his voice steady but resolute. "It's not just about recognition. We've had ideas, big ideas, that could have pushed Steintech into new markets. But every time we brought them up, they were shot down without discussion. We're not just workers, we're innovators. We want to contribute." The floodgates opened. Dozens of employees shared similar experiences, frustrations, missed opportunities, and a longing for a company culture that celebrated creativity and collaboration. Richard sat in silence, taking it all in. His earlier defensiveness had dissolved. He wasn't just hearing complaints. He was hearing the lifeblood of his company, the very people who had built Steintech from the ground up, pleading for change. Turning point. After nearly 2 hours, Elon took the microphone again. "Thank you for sharing your experiences. These are hard conversations, but they're necessary." He turned to Richard. "This is your opportunity to respond." Richard stood, his heart racing. He had prepared a few words, but they felt hollow now, insufficient in the face of such raw honesty. He decided to speak from the heart instead. "You're right," he began. "I failed you. I've been so focused on numbers and growth that I lost sight of what really matters. This company wouldn't exist without you. And I'm ashamed that it took something like this for me to realize it." A murmur spread through the crowd again, but this time, it carried a different tone. Surprise, perhaps even cautious optimism. "I can't change the past," Richard continued. "But I can promise you this, we will do better. We'll create a company where your ideas matter, where your contributions are celebrated. And I'm asking for your help to make that happen." Rebuilding Steintech. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Elon worked closely with Richard and the executive team to implement sweeping changes. Departments were restructured to encourage collaboration and innovation. A new feedback system was introduced, allowing employees to share their ideas directly with leadership. Work-life balance became a top priority. Flexible schedules, wellness programs, and mental health support were rolled out company-wide. The shift was immediate and palpable. Employees who had once walked on eggshells began to thrive. The office buzzed with energy and creativity. Perhaps the most surprising change was Richard himself. He became a visible, approachable presence, regularly walking the halls, asking employees for their input, and, most importantly, listening. The power of redemption. Months later, Steintech was nearly unrecognizable. The company's reputation had been restored, and employees who had once considered leaving now spoke proudly of their workplace. At a press conference, a journalist asked Richard about the turnaround. "What caused such a dramatic change?" they inquired. Richard glanced at Elon, who stood beside him. "It all started with listening," he said. "We learned that leadership isn't about power, it's about service. And we were lucky enough to have a teacher who reminded us of that." Elon smiled, but his expression was humble. "The real credit goes to the employees," he said. "They believed in this company even when it gave them every reason not to. They're the heroes of this story. A new legacy." As the company celebrated its remarkable turnaround, Richard found himself reflecting on the journey. He had been given a second chance, something few leaders ever received. And he was determined not to waste it. "Thank you," he said to Elon one evening as they stood in the now bustling R&D department. "For everything?" Elon nodded. "Just remember, true leadership is a constant process. Stay curious, stay humble, and you'll do just fine." Richard extended his hand, and for the first time in years, he felt a genuine sense of hope. Together, they had taken a broken company and turned it into something stronger than ever before, a place where innovation, compassion, and resilience thrived. As Stein Tech continued to flourish, Elon's time with the company slowly came to a close. The changes were already cemented, and the foundation for a more innovative and supportive workplace had been laid. It was time for him to hand the reins back fully to Richard and his team. The day of Elon's departure was bittersweet. Employees gathered in the large open lobby, the same place where many had once quietly whispered about leaving the company. Now, it was filled with smiles, laughter, and a renewed sense of purpose. Richard stood at the front, facing the crowd with a microphone in hand. He glanced at Elon, who remained relaxed, his signature smirk barely visible. "I never thought I'd be saying goodbye like this," Richard started. "When Elon came into our company, we were on the verge of collapse, internally and externally. We had lost sight of what made Stein Tech great in the first place, the people who worked tirelessly to push the boundaries of technology. We were broken." The room grew silent as Richard paused, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. "But we learned how to rebuild, thanks to Elon. He showed us that real innovation doesn't just come from technology. It comes from listening to each other, learning from our mistakes, and having the courage to do better." Elon raised a hand, interrupting with a light chuckle. "And it helps to have a few rockets up your sleeve." The crowd laughed, the tension in the room dissolving into warmth. As the speeches wrapped up, Richard held out a small box to Elon. Inside was a silver plaque with the inscription, "To Elon Musk, the catalyst of transformation. Thank you for reminding us what it means to lead with vision and heart." Elon took the plaque, his eyes scanning the words. "You know," he said, "this is probably the most valuable thing I've received in a long time." He looked up at the employees. "When I first walked in here, you all thought I was just some random janitor. But what I saw was a group of people full of talent and passion, just waiting for the right conditions to thrive. And you did just that." The crowd erupted in applause as Elon gave a small bow and stepped off the stage. In the months that followed, Stein Tech became a model for other companies around the world. Articles were written about the incredible turnaround, and other CEOs sought to replicate the strategies that had led to Stein Tech's rebirth. More importantly, employee satisfaction hit an all-time high. The innovative ideas that had once been stifled now flourished, leading to breakthroughs in clean energy, AI development, and sustainable technology. Stein Tech's transformation wasn't just a victory for the company. It became a symbol of how businesses could change for the better if they put their people first. Richard often received letters from other CEOs, asking for advice on how to foster the same kind of cultural shift. He always replied with the same words: "It starts with listening. Really listening." Despite his official departure, Elon often dropped by Stein Tech unannounced. He'd show up in the R&D department, offering suggestions and sharing his latest ideas. Employees had grown used to seeing him in his casual attire, blending seamlessly into the team as though he'd never left. One day, a young intern spotted him tinkering with a prototype. "Hey, aren't you?" the intern asked, wide-eyed. Elon smiled. "Just a guy who likes to build cool things," he said before turning back to the prototype. The impact of Stein Tech's transformation spread beyond the company walls. Local communities began to benefit from new outreach programs funded by the company's success. Initiatives were launched to support education, sustainable development, and mental health awareness. Employees volunteered in these programs, eager to give back to the communities that had supported them through Stein Tech's darkest times. The once corporate giant became a beacon of hope, proving that businesses could thrive while also making the world a better place. As the years went by, Stein Tech never stopped evolving. Richard remained at the helm, continuously pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But he never forgot the lessons he had learned during that pivotal time. He often reflected on Elon's words, "Stay curious. Stay humble." One afternoon, as he walked through the bustling office, Richard spotted a group of young engineers huddled around a prototype. Their faces were lit with excitement and determination, the same spark he had once seen in Elon's eyes. It was in that moment that Richard realized the true power of transformation. It wasn't about reaching an endpoint. It was about the journey, the constant pursuit of something greater, driven by a relentless belief in the potential of people. And in that pursuit, anything was possible. After Elon's departure, SteinTech thrived like never before. The company's reputation was at an all-time high, with the media hailing its transformation as one of the greatest business turnarounds in history. But with success came new challenges, and Richard knew maintaining that momentum wouldn't be easy. Every day brought new decisions, pressures, and the delicate balance of innovation and sustainability. Employees worked tirelessly to keep the company's newfound energy alive, but Richard couldn't help feeling a subtle tension brewing. The fear of slipping back into old patterns lingered. One evening, while reviewing the latest quarterly report, Richard's phone lit up with a familiar number. "Elon," Richard greeted. "Perfect timing." "Let me guess," Elon said. "You're worried about sustaining the momentum?" Richard chuckled. "You always know." "I've been there," Elon continued. "It's not about staying on top, it's about staying curious and keeping people inspired. You've already done the hard part. Now it's about empowering your team to take it further, reigniting the fire." Inspired by the conversation, Richard called an emergency leadership meeting the next morning. His goal was simple: to reignite the spark of creativity and collaboration that had fueled SteinTech's rebirth. "We've come far, but we're just getting started," Richard told the leadership team. "The next phase isn't about following the roadmap we've built, it's about breaking new ground." The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose. Departments that had grown slightly complacent sprang back to life. R&D teams launched ambitious projects, and employees at every level were encouraged to pitch wild ideas, no matter how impractical they seemed. Richard even implemented Innovation Days, where employees could dedicate time to passion projects that had the potential to change the industry. A new generation of innovators. One of the most unexpected outcomes of this new era was the rise of young, fearless innovators within SteinTech. Among them was Maya, a brilliant young engineer who had once worked quietly in the background but now led a team developing breakthrough AI-powered sustainable solutions. Maya had been inspired by the changes she witnessed during Elon's time as a janitor. The culture of openness and curiosity encouraged her to think bigger and bolder than she ever had before. Her latest project involved creating AI-driven energy grids capable of optimizing renewable energy distribution in real time, an idea that could revolutionize the industry. During a presentation, Richard leaned forward, captivated by her vision. "This could be the future of energy," he said. "Let's make it happen." As SteinTech's influence grew, the company began collaborating with global organizations to tackle some of the world's most pressing challenges. Climate change, sustainable infrastructure, and space exploration became central to its mission. Richard found himself representing SteinTech on panels alongside world leaders and tech giants. At one such conference, he was asked what had driven the company's transformation. He smiled and answered, "We remembered that people are our greatest resource. When you trust them, listen to them, and give them the space to innovate, they'll do extraordinary things." The audience erupted in applause, and Richard felt a swell of pride, not for himself, but for every employee who had made SteinTech what it was today. The return of an old friend. It was an unseasonably warm autumn afternoon when Elon walked back into SteinTech headquarters, unannounced as always. This time, though, he was greeted not as a mystery janitor but as a hero returning home. Employees gathered around him, eager to share their stories and thank him for the role he had played in transforming their lives and careers. Elon listened intently, offering advice and cracking the occasional joke. When he reached Maya's desk, he paused, noticing the complex models on her screen. "What's this?" he asked. Maya grinned. "A real-time AI energy optimization system. Still in its early stages, but it's showing promise." Elon's eyes lit up. "That's incredible. Let me see the data." The two spent hours poring over the project, exchanging ideas and refining the concept. By the time they were done, Maya had an entirely new strategy for taking the project to the next level. A lesson in legacy. As the day wound down, Richard invited Elon to his office for a quiet moment away from the buzz of the company floor. They sat across from each other, sipping coffee and reflecting on how far they had come. "You know," Richard said, "there was a time when I thought Steintech would collapse. But now it feels limitless." "That's because it is," Elon replied. "You built something bigger than any single person, something that will continue to grow and evolve long after we're gone." Richard nodded, the weight of Elon's words sinking in. He had always thought of success as reaching the top, but now he understood it was about building a foundation strong enough to support future generations. Months turned into years, and Steintech never lost its edge. The company continued to innovate, expanding into new industries and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Richard eventually stepped down as CEO, passing the torch to Maya, who had become a natural leader and visionary. Under her guidance, Steintech entered a new golden age, leading the world in sustainable technology and advanced AI systems. Elon watched from afar, occasionally dropping in to lend his expertise or offer a fresh perspective. He often smiled to himself, knowing that what they had built was more than a company, it was a movement. Years later, during an interview, Elon was asked what his proudest achievement was. The interviewer expected him to mention one of his companies, a groundbreaking innovation, or perhaps his ventures into space. Instead, Elon leaned back in his chair and said, "It was the day I walked into Steintech as a janitor. Because that's when I saw firsthand how much potential lies within people. If you just give them the chance to shine." The world had changed in many ways, but one thing remained constant: the power of believing in people.